What was it like, achieving what you achieved last December, kind of, leaving the stadium without the cup and no big homecoming and everything else? Like,
It was it
what
was
was it?
it was a very humbling situation. Um, it was it was very special, I suppose, for the group because obviously we were all together, and I suppose the success was shared within the group that evening. Of course, we would have loved to have come back and to have been with our supporters, to be with our families, our clubs, work colleagues, but it just wasn't to be. And I suppose none of us even realised on the 13th of December what was coming in January. That was rather frightening, to be honest. And you know, I was just glad that we got to have the championship played off last year. And I thought, my thoughts on it. I thought it would have been an absolute tragedy had we not managed to get a championship played last year, regardless of who was successful in it. From a historical perspective, from a resilience perspective, I thought it was a really important thing that was played. And I think, hats off to everybody who made it happen. So yeah, it has been very strange. From the 13th of December, none of us met like for months really. So there wasn't a sign of a cup for 4 months either. Like, so it was a very strange thing. It was a super achievement. We are extremely proud of the achievement. Extremely proud of our performance levels last year. Extremely proud of the players and all the backroom team, what they did. It was a different All Ireland. It was a different time, I suppose, but one that we look back in time, I think, on and be very proud of our contribution to that championship.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, hard to describe it, Jason. Really, to be honest, it was a very surreal whole couple of months, really.
Yeah. Cheers.
John, Philip Lanigan here. How are you doing?
Philip, how are you? Good to see you.
Good, I'm good.
Well,
you mentioned the kind of the sense of history nearly with what happened last winter. I guess what about sense of history attached to what the team have been achieving and hope to achieve? I guess if the summer runs as planned, you might have a link back to the great team of the 30s and, consecutive Munster titles on the team, the kind of Mick Mackey's era. So what about that sense of history about what this team has achieved?
I'd be straight to Philip. I haven't given it one single solitary moment's consideration. Like you just don't get very much opportunity to reflect. Like whilst we had no training or matches or meetings or any get-togethers of any description over the last 4 months, you might say that would give you opportunity to reflect on what had been achieved. But when you're in my job by day, trying to manage a school, and you're told on the 6th of January that the school is going back to online learning again, those opportunities to reflect are zero after that, because you're just literally firefighting to keep, in touch with your teachers, your support staff, your students, your parents. So, it's been a really challenging time in education. Like, people send their kids off to school, but when you have hundreds of kids at home trying to be educated through online, like for all the families out there, they know what's involved. People with kids know what was involved. So for us, it was all consuming. Even if there was training, I wouldn't have even been able to engage in it of any description, because you're just totally taken over by the day job in that circumstance. So it has been great now to get everybody back into school and get everybody, in back into their routines again. And, hurling has come back on, and, I've really enjoyed the last 2 weeks and going to training. It's been good for my head, as well as, enjoying being back with the lads. But I suppose that type of reflection, I think, Philip, will possibly maybe only come in years to come, and right now I'm looking forward to Saturday night. I know it's going to be a huge, huge challenge for us. Every time we play Tipperary, it's a real, real tough game. They have superb hurlers all over the pitch. They have a lot of young players coming through out of their under-20s teams for the last 2 years, 21 teams. So they have a lot coming through, and that's where my focus is right now, is preparing the team for Saturday night and being ready for training tomorrow night. It's very short-term goals, I suppose, really at the moment, short-term focus.
And just, I guess there's a common consensus that the unusually short turnaround from the All-Ireland would probably play into the hands of the title holders more than any team, that it's going to be harder for other counties to close the gap. So what do you think about that Limerick, the way it's fallen, Limerick are in a better position maybe than ever to kind of stay ahead of the pack?
That perceived gap, I'm glad there's only 3 words in the letter gap. It's a short word. It's a short gap, I can assure you. Next Saturday night we could know very much how much that gap is. So listen, we know full well that on any given day, any teams in the All-Ireland competition are capable of beating each other. It comes down to a matter of moments, decisions, execution of shots, last ditch tackles, hooks, blocks, flicks. It comes down to the very minutiae of details. And I've no doubt that we're going to see some absolutely cracking games of hurling in the weeks ahead. I think all of the squads will have enjoyed the break and will be back fresh and will be hungry for action. And it's a case of, over the coming weeks, we're going to see where teams are at. And I think what we'll see is that we're going to have one hell of a championship come the summer, and it's only around the corner. So, yeah, I'd say enjoy the next couple of weeks. There's going to be some great games. Great
stuff. Thanks, John.
Sean Moore in the Times. How are you?
Sean, how are you?
In relation to the new disciplinary rules which are coming in, is it odd to be about to embark on them without having had the usual ways of getting acclimatized to them? It's a very rushed preparation as things are.
Yeah, listen, we haven't engaged in the conversation just yet. That's with our players, because when we analysed last season, for example, there was only one potential incident that could be taken as a sample or as a typical scenario. And even at that wasn't a very clear-cut one. It would have come under the constitution of other defenders were around and would have possibly gotten back to make a tackle. So hence it shouldn't have been a penalty with a yellow card or a red if it was a second offence, etc. Right. So listen, we're legislating here for a specific situation. I don't believe that makes good rule making, to be honest with you. Hard law is bad law, and this is a hard rule. I feel sorry for the referees that they have to, make the decisions with this rule that they're going to have to make, because I think there are too many factors to be taken in. This is my own personal view now. This is not the view of Limerick or anything else now. This is just my own personal view. I partly guess somebody would bring up the rules tonight. So, I was reading through the document that we were sent where the rules were explained. And, if I just share the screen with you there, I'm not able to, okay. Doesn't matter. But, the rule is quite a complex rule. You have to decide where, first of all, the infringement took place. That's a real challenge with the speed of hurling, to be even in the same half of the field at times. If it's a long delivery, for example, and a player takes it clean in the air, it's very difficult. Number two, you have to determine, are there other defenders between that player and the goal? And then are there defenders who could have gotten back to make a tackle? And then the nature of the infringement then, is it careless use of the hurley? How many different careless uses of the hurley do we have under Rule 5? I don't know, I must look up that. Then we have the pull down, or we have the trip as well. And then, of course, what you do of a wet day when a player might slip and you're at the other end of the field, determining whether he slipped or whether he was actually tripped could be a challenge also. So I just think there are too many variables that have to be decided in a moment. And I have had the pleasure of standing in the middle of the field with our group of players and refereeing their in-house games. And I know what it's like to have to try and make decisions in our own in-house games when you're struggling to keep up with the play. Now, thankfully, the referees are much fitter than I am. But, you know, I understand what it's like to do that in training. I can't imagine how difficult it'll be with 82,000 people in Croke Park with a couple of minutes left in a big game. That's not an easy place to be. That's not an easy place to be. So, yeah, that's a tough rule. That's a tough rule. Now, I know there was a few incidents of cynicism in last year's campaign. You know, you could probably pick out maybe 3 or 4 in hurling. But like, do 3 or 4 moments in hurling matches mean that we have to go back and bring in such a hard rule? I don't. My personal opinion is that we shouldn't have to. I think there is at elite level of sport, in every sport, there's a certain degree of cynicism. Okay, with the World Championships in snooker going on at the moment, if a player's snookered and the ball, his attempt misses, it's put back again. It's put back again. It's put back again. One could say that that's a cynical approach to playing snooker. Why doesn't he take on the next shot that he's presented with? His ball's there, he can shoot it. Why doesn't he take him on? Well, he's trying to win his match. It's a World Championships. So rugby players can take the ball out of the back of a ruck and kick it straight out into the stand to end the game. You know, a rugby player on the ground can put his hand on the ball and cynically give away a penalty when the ball is on the ground. A soccer player can take the ball into the corner flag and play with himself and just, you know, retain the ball in the corner flag. You know, I don't believe there's any sport that doesn't have some opportunity, or some field sport in it that doesn't have some opportunity to be cynical if you really want to be. And does this end cynicism in our game? I don't believe it will. There'll be some other way found. You know, somebody will think of some other angle, some other approach that will bring in another aspect of cynicism. So I think we can spend a lot of time trying to take out what is perceived to be cynicism. And at the end of the day, are we going to solve the problem? We probably are not. I could be proven completely wrong, Sean, by the way. I don't know. This is my belief in what I feel about this particular change. So, yeah, sorry now, Sean, for taking so long, but it's very complex, like, isn't it? I don't know how you feel about it, but I find it's very complex. And yet we're trying to legislate for a moment in a game. And I think it could be very hard. I think it could be very hard.
Yeah, thanks. One other thing in relation to Paddy O'Loughlin, you said it stepped away. Is that an open-ended thing, or do you think he'd be back for the championship?
I don't actually know, to be honest with you, Sean. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see.
All right. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
John, Colm Keys here. How are you?
Colm, hello there. How are you?
How are things? Just you had the experience of being champions going into 2019. What sort of pitfalls do you think, you know, lending on or calling on that experience from 2019, and you had a good 2019. What sort of pitfalls do you think there are for champions in a sport like hurling? What do you have to really watch out for over these next few weeks and months?
Yeah, it's a great question. God, that's a great question. Yeah, I suppose, listen, number one, we have to put the learnings that we have from having been through this scenario before into place, you know. So, you know, as you say, that experience of having been there and having, you know, been through that experience, you do learn, you know, lessons from it, like you do from all seasons, really. You know, you will make mistakes, as, you know, a player, as a manager, you know, you're going to make certain mistakes that you might turn around and say, listen, I should have maybe changed my approach to this or that. But I think really you can overthink things too. And I think it's actually a great skill to be able to try and take each year as it comes on its own merits. Like, we don't know from week to week what players are going to get injured, Will we have the same players available to us as we did last year at the end of the year? We may not. So will some new players come through and find, that they can push their way onto the team? I hope they can. I hope the players do come through and do put their hand up and push their way into the group. So I think this year is different too. You see, from any other previous years, if you like, because when we finished in December, we didn't scarcely meet each other for 4 months after that, whereas previous winners would have had all sorts of functions and travel, team holidays, all-star trips, Super 11s, events with their clubs, events with their colleges, their workplaces, medal presentation nights, all those distractions that are out there, for winners. None of that was there this year. So, when it was over, it was over. That was it. Finito. So this year is different to any other previous winning experience, is what I would say to you. And, for our lads, there's good in that and there's bad in that, because, for example, I haven't been able to have the cup at my home place since, that hasn't happened, and it's not going to probably happen. So that's a pity. That's a loss. That's not a gain. You couldn't turn that into a gain. So that's a loss. But am I sorry that I didn't have to traipse around the country, which is, to 24 primary schools and secondary schools and, all the rest of that goes with it. That's hard. That's hard. That's mentally hard. That's tiring and exhausting. And we didn't have to go through that this year. So we're saved all that. And that is, in its own right, it is a loss as well, because those organizations, benefit greatly from those experiences and those visits. But it does take a lot out of you. So it's hard to know what way it'll play out. Will it all be positive, or will there be some negatives? And I think it's going to be a mix. But I think the big thing really, Colin, though, if you think back on 2019 and take out all of the side shows and all the other bits and pieces that were there, the bottom line is, we weren't as consistent in 2019 as we were in 2018 or 2020. All right, we lost a number of championship matches in Munster, and we eventually ended up losing the All-Ireland semi-final to Kilkenny. We had some really, really great performances, but we had some poor performances in there as well. And ultimately, that's what it bore down to. We weren't consistent in 2019. And that is why we weren't successful in 2019, because we were inconsistent. And you have to have a consistent high level of performance to be victorious and successful. That's the bottom line. So I think if I was to go after something this year, I'd be looking for consistency.
Finally, just from me, John, you've had 2 years now of 2 seasons where there's been a lot of remote preparation, and I'm not sure whether players have come back to you in the last couple of weeks as fit as they would have been with a full pre-season. But my point is, do you see a different way for GAA teams to train in the future? There's obviously a lot more trust being given to players because they're away and they can't train together. But do you see a different way that's maybe less taxing on them, on inter-county players in the future? That could be a better way, perhaps, in that they're given more space to train remotely.
Yeah, listen, when you think back, Colin, on what we were doing, going back to training in November, doing a pre-season in November to December with a pre-season competition, followed by a month in January, which was, a mix of closing out that pre-season competition, Fitzgibbon Cup, preparations for the National Hurling League, and then starting the National Hurling League at the end of January, and that progressing on until the end of March, taking a month for the club, and then going back into the Munster Championship and the All-Ireland Series, and it all finishing the end of August. That can probably never happen again. Like that was nuts. Like, Jesus took wear the heart of a stone. You know, it was so long. Like, there was no end to it. And then, you know, sooner finished, and you had to turn your eye to planning literally 2 weeks later. So it was a 365 job. You know, it was round the clock, round the calendar. So yeah, split season, 6 months. I don't think any intercounty panel should be back until the 1st of January, 2nd of January, in fact. I'd give them New Year's Eve. Let them have New Year's Eve, no training on New Year's Day. And anyone that would organise it should be shot. But, you know, the 2nd of January, let the lads have their New Year's Eve. No training at all in December, intercounty training. Get back the 1st of January and drive on from there. And as you say, trust the players to come back in reasonable shape themselves. And the fellas that don't, they'll play the ultimate price, they won't be picked, and that's it.
Thanks, John. Thanks.
Okay, men, if we're done. Hello?
John, just the one question and a very brief one, if you don't mind.
How are you?
Very good. Yourself?
Good enough.
It's just emerged this evening, John, that the Muir Furna, they've been given a reprieve, and I suppose they'll be able to continue in their role this season. Is that a welcome bit of news? It
is, yes. And maybe not for the reasons that you might think. For me, I feel the Mayor Fórna role has one particular function which I think is really important, and that is their ability to go into a player who may not be feeling well and actually get a read from him, because, you know, he's in around the field from time to time when there's a break in play. And I think, you know, if there was an issue with the Mayor Fórna's encroachment onto the pitch, there were rules and procedures that could be followed to punish those who were in breach of those rules. In other words, they could have fined them, they could have suspended them, they could have done anything they wanted with those that were, you know, blatantly flouting the laws. And I think it was actually something that was more occurring maybe more so in football than it was in hurling. But listen, at the same time, I think it could have been dealt with, and I think it could have been sorted. But I think it's a really important facet to have somebody that can, a player can call, because the first aid, the medic, the doctor and the physio are only brought onto the field when there's an injury, right? But if you're a player who's on the field and you're not feeling well, right, you might be after getting a bang to the head that wasn't picked up by the referee, and you may not be feeling so well. You could be nauseous, for example. You could be suffering from concussion. The Mayor Fórna picks up on an awful lot of that stuff, and when he comes out, would report it back to the medical team or report it to me, and we can deal with it. And we've had to deal with several different scenarios over the last 4 years. And for me, that is the main reason I would allow the Mayor Fórna to continue in the role. It has nothing to do with coaching. It has nothing to do with organisation. It is simply that we can, it's a big pitch, like the pitch is ginormous. When you're in Crow Park, to the corner back and the far corner by the hill might as well be in Drumcondra or outside in the airport road. You know what I mean? You have the hope of getting a message to him or he getting a message back up to you. And like even your hurley carries aren't allowed to have a radio or all these things. So it's very sanitized, but I think ultimately somebody will pay the price for that sanitization of our game. And somebody will unfortunately be sick in the field and will remain there until something happens. And that's my main concern with the issue with the Mayor Fórna.